Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, which is Macbeth off the page, bringing performance techniques to your lessons. I'm going to fulsomely introduce our speakers in a moment, but for now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about the English Association. So I'm Becky, I'm the Chief Exec of the EA, and I'm just delighted to see you all this afternoon. The EA is a learner society and subject association which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through to secondary and further education and higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to Toby and Maria for joining us this afternoon. Thank you also to our members who make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. Membership starts at just £29 for the whole year and enables you to support our events and campaigning work, and you get access to a wide range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. Okay, enough from me. Now it is my great pleasure to hand over to Toby, the founder and artistic director of RABBLE Theatre, and his colleague Maria. Take it away.
Thanks, Becky. And it's a real pleasure to be here. Privilege, even. £29 a year. That's a bargain, Becky. So my name is Toby. I am, as Becky said, the founder and the artistic director of a professional theatre company based in Reading. Before all that, I went to St Andrews University where I studied English. I trained as an actor after that at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School. Worked as an actor around the place, and then wanted to do a bit more myself and have an influence on the sort of cultural landscape of Reading. We do big professional shows, but a really big part of what we do is education. So we work in schools a lot, we work with adults a lot, we work in community centres a lot. We reach about 900 people every single term. So we have an army of freelancers led by a very small core team of overworked 4 people. So we come across all sorts of people. As I say, we get into schools a lot. And one of the biggest things we do in schools is Macbeth workshops, which is sort of the basis of what we're going to be talking about today. We develop these workshops with our own in-house team, with the University of Reading English department, and with our associate director, who is an associate workshop leader at the Globe. So those were sort of influences behind this. So we all clubbed together and put our experience together. Before I carry on, thank you so much for filling in the couple of questions that we gave you. That was really useful. I can see from the answers that there's a real range of confidence in teaching this daunting old subject, which is really interesting. So bear with me if you feel like this is either too complicated or too easy, whatever. I'm sure you can understand, where I am. The aim of today, an insight into the sort of workshop that we run. I suppose if you think of it as our aim is to get Shakespeare into the body rather than the mind, as a few people said, Shakespeare is written to be performed. So that is, at the forefront of what we do. We put on loads of big Shakespeares, and we always try and think of new ways of doing it, new contexts, new, whilst being faithful, of course. But I noticed that a few people commented on trying to explain to parents the relevance of Shakespeare today. That's something I'll come on to a little bit, but that's 100% what we try to do when we do stage our Shakespeares. So when we go into a class, and the first thing we do is sort of set up what it was like in the theatre, and it's an idea for you guys. Is that I'm on mute? I'm not. No, I'm not. Good. Let's get them to do it. So we might start by getting a big group of children in the middle of the room, put a semicircle of tables around the outside. I understand this does cause some chaos, but let's start bold and, hopefully it doesn't all fall apart. And then put chairs behind those tables. Get a load of children to stand in the middle. Some sat on the tables around the edge, and then stood on the chairs behind that. So they have and then we can explain the basic structure of the Globe Theatre. We could have a little talk about how this is a physical representation of the class system. You've got the poor people standing, and a little detail about where these poor people come from. They are, you know, in a modern context, they're from the local estates. They're on the subsidised tickets. You know, there are people in the middle who, you know, the rest. You can talk about that class system, and then there's the royals who are tucked away. But also like the atmosphere, it's rowdy, it's sociable. There's people eating pies, fruits, and nuts. They're drinking a lot. They are relieving themselves in the sides. It's not an altogether pleasant place. And if you are confident with your class, why not, you know, let them have a little play around with that sort of atmosphere and have a discussion after that. How does it feel to be in the lowest class of society? And of course, the highest as well. There's little talk about the fact that it could be raining, there's no roof, all that sort of stuff. But we find that this is just a really nice way of loosening up the class and just getting them into the world, and also reminding them of the fact that the theatre was not a place of reverence and quiet and ooh, lights are going down, all the rest of it as it is today. It was a place of socializing and gossip and superstition and all those different things. So how do you get their attention? It's a good way to set them one of this challenge. How do you get the class to shut up? How do you get them to listen to you? The first line of this play is an excellent example. When shall we three meet again? You know the rest in thunder, lightning, and in rain. So there's a good opportunity there for the stage directions. Sorry, for the stage techniques, the sound effects is what I'm trying to say. So you can talk about the boulder that is up in the behind the upstairs in the globe that they roll to create the thunder effect, the wind machine that is still there, the blood and guts that they would have gone and got from the butcher. All these fun things that you would get to, which these witches would have been playing with, and of course the fact that the witches were men dressed as women, and really sort of just go in and let them do this. Let them, right, you got to make a thunder sound effect, you got to make this, whatever. Set them these tasks and whatever else you can think of. No water pistols, I don't think that might go too far. But you know, how do they create this storm effect, this horrible weather, this nasty atmosphere? You could touch on the fact that the roof of the little stage, the stage roof is painted gold and with the heaven and the stars on against the blue backdrop, and what that referenced, and the fact that when you're in a Shakespeare at the Globe, every time you reference these things, God, heaven, stars, you have to traditionally point up to the ceiling, and every time it's hell and Satan, you're always referring to the ground. And a reminder that this was, I mean, sometimes you think of old days, or young people think of old days and think of, oh, they were very good and they were very conscientious and very religious. Actually, they were very naughty. They stank. They were all sleeping with each other. There was loads of disease. There was lots of itching, the smells, and superstition was a big old thing. So just, I don't know, it's a really nice, you can play, hopefully you've got a few ideas, but like how to just set the scene before really delving into the play. Then we can start getting into the play. But I think in our workshop we don't go like scene by scene, but we might just start by just, again, this goes back to the question of like, how is it relevant today? Well, this is a play where every single value is defined through the lens of masculinity, really, unfortunately. Every comment, every bit of every positive comment, every bit of praise is through a masculine lens. And what's the effect of that? And we'll come to Lady Macbeth later on. But how does that shape your world? And what's it like living in a world, imagine, where men just seem to want power all the time? You know, why do certain men seem to be on an endless search for power? And of course, you can talk about Trump and Putin. Right, so there are, on the surface, a few archetypes in this play, and you can get them to play with this, so you need a bit of space. But the first one is the warrior, and the warrior, hang on, let me tilt this, walks around with one arm directly in front of them, and they walk in straight lines. They don't curve at all. They don't have that in their mind. They just walk straight, and you've got to be careful with your language when you're running this exercise, but they just destroy everything in front of them. course, you don't want them punching each other, but that's what they do. That's what the warrior does. It's just kill, kill, kill. I'm going to get where I want to. So you can get them to just walk around and just walk in straight lines. And if they need to turn, they just do it like that, and then they walk on. There's not a lot of humor attached. There's not a lot of sentiment to the way that they move. Then there's the sovereign. The sovereign is sort of similar, but very, very in control. The sovereign starts by just placing the crown on their head. And because they're a sovereign, they don't really need to move much. Everybody else moves for them. So they might move, and they would just expect things to sort of flow around them because they are the highest in the land. And how does that make the student feel when they move in that way? Next up, the carer. The carer is the opposite. The carer is always arms out, always welcoming, always ready to give a hug, to question how people are feeling, always there, sensitive. So moving around the space, allow them, of course, to interact like that. And just how does it feel to be that sort of matronly, loving, caring figure? Next up, the last one, the fourth one, is the trickster. And the trickster, you get them to click their fingers and they never move in a predictable way. They're very often knees bent, quite low to the ground, scuttling around like some little animal. Totally unpredictable, always looking for an opportunity to evade. And those are your four key archetypes in the play. So you can have a brief discussion at the beginning if they know the play a little, like, oh, who's what? Is there one that fits someone and one that fits another person? And as you're probably already thinking, as the play goes on, as you keep asking this, actually one character maybe morphs into something else. And actually, maybe they can be two things at one time. They can be pretending to be one, but and it just sort of, and then you can open the conversation up to like, okay, what's Mr. Goggins next door? What, and like get them to think about real people, or what's your mum like? what sort of character is here? So they really think about real people, and then, well, what's Lady Macbeth? Is she a carer? Is she? And yeah, you can take that. You can approach a certain scene, just get them to read lines in that tone, the carer. Okay, what if you change that to the warrior? How does it change that? And with Lady Macbeth, it's always so interesting because you can generally do all four of these and it works just as well every time. Okay, another exercise just to sort of world build. I always write judge a class. I always, when I'm sending our teachers out on this, judge the group before you do this one. You may want to do it in a playground or in the sports hall because it's quite chaotic. But it's just to sort of build the world of the chaos of war, because so much of this play is defined by your value on the battlefield and your experience of war. One person, you say this to the whole room. You imagine that you have one person in the room is a sword. So you don't look at them, don't say who it is, but let's say there's 30 of you in the room. Just imagine there's one person in the room has a sword, and that sword person is trying to kill you. Another person in the room, imagine who that is a shield. You've got to get the shield between you and the sword. And you've got 30 seconds to do it. But of course, every single person in the room is choosing a sword and a shield. So you say, go, and off they go. And you count down. So at the end, it's total chaos because everyone's trying to hide behind each other. And it's, it's a silly game. But you then play it again and just up the stakes a bit and make it double time. Say if you lose, you're going to get this or whatever. And just ask them how they felt running around, and then build the world. How would it feel if there really was a sword and a shield and this person was your Banquo and defending you and you are, in genuine peril? How would that feel? How did the pace of the room change when the time counted down? What was the tone of the room? And it gets higher and more, the adrenaline goes a bit. And then just trying to, of course it's a silly little game and everyone will be laughing, but how would it feel if everybody around you just don't know who's your sword, who's your shield? And that is the reality of a battle like that. Very often you are just in the thick of all this blood and guts, and you can bring the butcher back in, get your livers all over you, all that sort of stuff. Another game for getting them to understand the sort of psyche of a war celebrity like Macbeth. Just get them to line up down the middle of the room, two lines either side. You choose a Macbeth, send them out. send the Macbeth out of the room. One side of the room is going to chant a series of lines like "O valiant cousin," "Brave Macbeth," whatever. Choose a load of phrases that praise him. The other one, give them a load more, and then the moment Macbeth walks in the room, they've just got to cheer and just celebrate and say whatever they like, really. But the point is that this is the most revered warrior of all time. And you could pick one out and get them to be the TV interviewer and say, how does it feel to be our nation's hero? And you've just saved we just won the battle and all this sort of stuff. And just have a bit of fun with just making them feel like they are the absolute warrior of all time. I don't know, the highest celebrity in the land. And that celebrity is not based on how pretty you are and how good at football you are. It's based on how good at fighting you are. Um, and yeah, have a conversation about that, and then the relationship to King Duncan and why what the king values, and all that hierarchy again being based on your fighting. Yeah. Um, One exercise we do, I will get more specific later on. I'm just chatting through a few general ideas we use just for sort of world building. A murder thermometer is a helpful thing to drop in at various points throughout the teaching of Macbeth. Basically, you get them all. You say, right, this end of the room is Macbeth is not going to kill the king. He does not want to do it. He's not going to do it. Definitely not. This end of the room is he definitely is going to kill the king. There is no doubt in my mind he is going to do it. And you get everybody to stand as close or as far away to each side of the room. And then you stop, get them to freeze, and then you ask everybody why they think. And it's just a really good way of getting them to have a think about what's happened, what's been said, who's been promoted, who's been left behind, who's heard something from a dodgy witch about their future, and who is getting a bit jealous, and all that sort of stuff. And it always gets good engagement, that exercise. It's very simple, and you can do it in a classroom without moving too many desks and tables, chairs. Okay, a little more, an idea for a scene. If they're, I don't know, if you think it would help them to just physicalize it, it can help if they're. I mean, the witches is a funny one because it can just be so silly to some kids, and they just, it's just not into it. But it can be quite fun to build a few, like 3 to 6 freeze frames of it. So what you can do, a nice easy way of doing this, you split the group into 4s. One of these is going to be the director. The other 3 are going to be the people in the images. Take 3 to 6 lines. So it might be, in this case, how have I written down? What are these? Withered and so wild. Look not like the inhabitants of the earth. Choppy fingers, skinny lips. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid it. So those are like the prompts for each of their freeze frames. And off they go. They've got, I don't know how long you want to give them, 10, 20 minutes to create a series of freeze frames based on each of those lines. You, of course, can choose your own lines, and you can do this for any scene that you want. And they have fun doing it. The director works with them, and they can use anything, well, within reason, of course, anything from around the room, use their uniform, their ties, dim the lights, use a phone torch, get a Bluetooth speaker if they can to choose some tunes to set the atmosphere. Anything they can learn, that will get their imagination, just go for it. And then you go around and you watch each of the different groups, and it's a very nice way of getting them to physicalize these witches and say the lines, practice saying the lines. Oh yeah, that's something I should have said. If you want, you can get each of the 3 actors to say these lines one at a time, all together, however they want to do it. Or the director can sort of narrate them as they go, or they could like pre-record them on their phones and put them through a voice thing, whatever they want to do to make it more fun. Yeah, and you watch each of the groups around and have a discussion about what worked, what was interesting. It's also, lines are really, really hard to learn sitting down reading them. And so in terms of learning quotes, getting up on your feet and physicalizing them is much, much easier. And as actors, when you start rehearsing and you start putting lines to movement and physical objects. And I know when I pick up this tea, that it's going to trigger something, and or someone comes and punches me in the face, I'm going to say something to them. You attach lines to physical memory. So it's a good way of sort of getting that involved as well. Okay, let's go into specifics of a scene. We don't have time very well. Okay. So if I take Act 1, Scene 7, for example, and just this is an example of how we would build confidence in a scene. And this is Lady Macbeth's castle. So firstly, always nice to talk about Lady Macbeth, as I'm sure you all do. An extremely intelligent woman who lives in a castle in the middle of nowhere. And you can go and visit that castle, and it's like really is in the middle of nowhere. She's in charge of her estate, if you like, but doesn't really have anyone on her level to engage in conversation, and that sort of anything stimulating mentally, and is disregarded because of her sex, and is frustrated because of these masculine values. But of course, as you all know, uses them and uses those values to embarrass her husband. You can talk about her lost child and how does that affect her, and that's of course a really nice opportunity for discussion. And these are just general, these of course, again, going back to nothing's changed. This is a woman who's disrespected, who's lost a child. Like you don't need to know about the play to be talking about that. What did I say? Yeah, try to keep an idea of her in the present, not some distant historical figure. I think, that's a really important thing that we all try to do. Like whenever we're taking on a character, just if the moment it becomes something distant and otherly, it's hard to emotionally connect and relate to them. If you try and keep the idea of this person in the present and relate it to someone or whatever, or a memory, it's much easier to be connected. So you could start by just giving them one line each, split them into twos, give them one line each. Yes, no. And they've got 1 minute to win the argument. All they can say is yes or no. Off you go. So they'll probably all just shout at each other. That's the first thing that normally happens. Okay, right. Round 2. You're not allowed to shout. So you have to be a bit cleverer. What can you do? You can use you can be clever with your whispering, with your physicality. You can think of those 4 archetypes. You can use the room. You can turn your back. You can go out. You can stamp your feet, whatever, but you can't shout at them. Then have a little discussion about who won, why did they win, what was effective and what wasn't. Then just chat about the scene. What's the context of this scene? Well, the context is that they've just invited the king to their house, and he's next door. He's behind that door. And if you start shouting and making loads of noise, the king's going to hear that you're plotting to kill him, and then it's game over. So you've got to be super, super careful, and think about as you're. Well, we talk about this in a minute, but when you go through the lines, like what would happen if you were heard saying those lines? Even thinking these thoughts would be, you'd be killed, corporal punishment. So you've got to, be clever. But rather than leap straight into the whole scene, because that could easily just go back to square one, it takes a bit of pre-planning, but just give them 4 lines that you think, 4 lines each, that you think sum up the scene well. What do we use? Sorry, I haven't got them in front of me, but 4 lines each. And that's all they've got. And they might not remember it first time, but you hand them out or just give them on little pieces of paper, whatever. And that's what they've got. So again, no shouting, remember the context, and they've just got these 4. And 4 lines is sort of manageable. And if you want, you can trim the lines, so it's just like a word, like coward, or whatever else, mine's come back. And get them to run that exercise, and they can repeat these lines. They can say them in a circle. They can say them out of order. Actually, it's probably, it's work best if they don't go out of order, because otherwise they'll just get confused. But in my experience, you might find others. But yeah, run it a few times just with the few lines. Pause, get them to discuss it, get them to talk about the context. Who else was on there? Is there anyone else on their mind? Is there any sort of conscience, any sort of superstition that came up, anything like that? anything that relates to the wider story of the play. Um, and then when you've done that a couple of times, then what I would do is get them to get the whole scene and read it as a group once. So you take a few lines each, whatever, however you'd like to do that. And then have a discussion. What were the words we didn't understand? What were the difficulties? Um, just make sure that everyone's got a rough understanding of it, and then go into your twos again. Have a go. First time, so we do it 3 times, 4 times actually. First time, just read it together, just with a bit of energy, reading as much as we, as best as we can. Next time, every time there's a personal pronoun, I, you, they, whatever, you got to really strongly point either at you or I or they. The they is always towards that wherever that person is, or God. And really, really, but it can't just be you said. They've got to really slam their finger out or smack their chest, whatever it is. The benefit of that exercise is that very often is if a character is, you can generally get a character state of mind. If they are totally panicking, I will often come up a lot, or if they're feeling really threatened by that person, you will often, or being intimidating, but you get a really good sense of that in this scene. The next one, just simply, I hope you don't have expensive books, strike the page on every word you think the student thinks is important or emotional or interesting or whatever, but smack the page like an angry Spanish person. Probably shouldn't say that. And the benefit of that is it just gets, they physicalize it, they stop thinking about what they're doing, they stop thinking about what they're saying or how they're saying it or trying to be clever. It's just a way of being a bit silly, but also just noticing when there's words that are quite interesting or quite powerful or quite evocative. Then there's lots more things that we could do, but for the sake of today, just go do it again. Just do it, but this time actually just try and act it normally. So this will be the 5th time of reading it. And of course, if the whole scene is too long, you can just do a section of it. And they will hopefully all feel more confident, more slightly deeper understanding of the play, of the scene, having done that. If you wanted to do it again, you could get a couple. You could get a couple to share. Remind them that they are performing this to an audience. This isn't just to each other. They've got to share. They can look at us if there's something unbelievable. They can connect with the audience and then bring it back in. All those sorts of things. But that's a nice level of detail on a scene. Okay, great. I've got one more thing I was going to share with you, and that will take us to about 20 past. The last thing, just a little conversation around the iambic pentameter, which of course is always, oh, I'm being joined by a child. No, I'm not. I'm being joined by a wife, which is worse. Okay. Is the iambic pentameter. So of course, this is something that is terrifying to students and teachers and actors and everybody alike sometimes. It doesn't need to be. Let's just start by saying that they are the stage directions. Iambic pentameters are your actors' stage directions because they tell you which words are important. A really good example of this that I always cite is actually from Othello, when he says, and who is he who says I play the villain, is how it should not be said, emphasizing villain, basically. And who is he who says I play the villain? The right way, if you listen to the iambic, and who is he who says I play the villain? As in, I am pretending to be the villain. I'm not pretending to be the villain. I am the villain. But if you don't know the iambic pentameter, you could get your entire character of Iago wrong by missing out that word. So the iambic pentameter is your stage directions. It also allows you to know where your pauses are. You can only pause in Shakespeare when you're allowed to pause. And so 10 beats per line. If there's 9, 8, or 7, you can take those extra 3 beats for your pause. So, okay, Shakespeare's given that character a pause. Why is that character allowed to pause there? Is it because they just run out of energy, it can't be bothered? I mean, it genuinely could be. Or is it because they are so stressed, they've literally lost for words, or they are so exhausted, or whatever it is? There will be a reason, as you know, why there are pauses there. If there's loads more than 10, why? Does that mean that they are so excited that they can't stop talking? Or if it's really, really regular every single time, what does that suggest about the character's state of mind? Probably that they are well organized. Maybe they work for the military. Maybe and they like precision, but there will always be a reason why the structure is as it is. So how do we play with this? Let's check on anything. Yeah, okay. So you could take a monologue and you could literally take a step on each. And let me just grab my notes from this section. Um, yeah. So take a monologue and on every second beat, it's just on this version, just hop, literally physically jump in the air or hop. Just it's so basic and it makes the text sound rubbish, but just to get the understanding of how it works, to be you hop. Oh, that's a bad example, but hop on those lines. It's also useful to mention that iambic pentameter complements punctuation. Punctuation is the other stage direction that you get from Shakespeare. There's a full stop, it's a full breath. You're allowed to breathe on a full stop. If it's a comma, semicolon, you can take a sort of short, pausey breath, but you cannot stop midway unless Shakespeare says you can with a full stop. Which makes as they read and you get them to do this, you're not allowed to breathe until you get a full stop. It can be quite challenging, and you realise why you have to go to drama school. But yeah, get them to either hop on the line, change direction on a full stop. Hop on the beats, take a step on each beat, whatever it is, but just somehow physicalize it. That's of course, that's how we sort of start it. Of course, we go into more detail about how to address the iambic pentameter, but it's often the thing that is trickiest for students to get their head around. But is when you physicalize it and you start acting it, it's a really it starts making sense. Okay. What's yes? So that's sort of roughly the sort of introduction to the sort of workshops that we run in schools at RABBLE Theatre. If do we have any questions? I suppose is my next thing.
Yes, there's one question from Sheila in the chat, which is regarding the four chosen archetypes, warrior, sovereign, carer, trickster. Do students ask about these types? And do you ever add other types? How much time is spent on thinking about what a carer character might be like, etc.? Or would you say it's better to go with their first response as a warm-up exercise? I can see this being useful both as an introduction and also later on when students feel more intrigued by the play.
What we normally do is just go in with the four types. And we take a bit of time to describe them. Not too long, because I do want them to come up with their own sort of versions. And it's not like I'm telling them the carer has to be a nurse. It's not that at all. It's more like their personality is caring. So you can apply that to any human, any job, any whatever. And then it's sort of up to them and you to evolve that and to. But I would try not to be too sort of didactic about how they create the carer, the warrior, the regal one. I've forgotten what they're called.
Sovereign.
The sovereign, exactly. Yeah, I think that answers the question. Any others, Marianne?
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, anyone else with a question, please feel free to pop it in the chat. We don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay.
Becky, do you have anything?
Thank you. As you might have noticed, I was furiously scribbling notes. Thank you so much. Um, well, I think we asked folks in advance a couple of questions, like you said, Toby, and one of them was about the biggest single challenge that students face when engaging with Macbeth. And the thing that came through most strongly was the idea of language and approaching a language that's intimidating or seems unfamiliar. And I think you've shown really clearly how kind of physicality can help kind of get over that kind of barrier. But do you have any other kind of hints and tips that you might share about what to do if you're reading aloud, for example, and you hit a word where you think, oh, I don't know what that means? Do you just keep going? Do you stop? Like, how do you deal with that?
I think it's always best to discuss it very so no every professional production, even with like the world's greatest actors, always begins with a read through in a Shakespeare, as long as you've got the funding to do this, to have this time to do it. You will always start with a round the table read through, and you are fully encouraged to stop on every single word that you don't understand. There's a group discussion about what it is, and one of the books I recommended is the Shakespeare Dictionary. um, and having read that, I haven't read it, you know what I mean, referred to it quite a lot of the time, I can safely say that, well, actually, no, another way of saying it is the best way to start a conversation about a word is, what does it sound like it means? What do you think it means? What are just the guttural sounds of that word? What do they convey? What do they start making you feel? And like nine times out of 10, you're on the right track, because Shakespeare made up so many of his words, and they were just sort of just what do they sound like? What does it make you feel? And in my experience, yeah, most of the time you get there just by sort of guessing from the sounds. And of course, you're not always. And of course, you're like, I haven't got a clue what this means, and you literally just have to look it up. But there's no shame in doing that, and actually showing a bit of vulnerability and, I don't know what it means, often for me, gets people on side. Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. We have another couple of questions in the chat. So Lucy has asked, I was just wondering how to get students to understand the change to Macbeth. Are there any activities you have used to show this physically?
The change to Macbeth. Okay, you mean like physically as he sort of becomes more vile? Um, I mean, it depends how long you've got, and if you're directing the production, I suppose the archetypes is a good place to start. It's very sort of rudimentary, but it is, it's a sovereign is up straight, is upstanding, is they don't need to move a lot because they have authority, they're calm, they know they're right. The warrior might be a little less, they're certainly certain in what they want, but they morally they're not so involved. And what does that physical brute strength, if you like, what does that do to, if you throw a moral in there, what does that do to that? um, those four archetypes are useful because they are so distinct, and sort of playing around with those in a room. But it is a good way in. It's definitely a good way in. But this is what you do when you act a character. It is what you spend your time doing. How is this affecting my, how does stress affect my physical body? How does being defensive and being paranoid affect the way I walk into a room? And I think just keeping, rather than worrying, directing a student on how to physically be, ask them questions about how they're thinking and what's on their mind when they enter this room, and that might, encourage them to be more paranoid, and or whatever it is. Um, and it sort of empowers them a bit more than saying, right, you need to walk a bit more like this, sort of, if you see what I mean.
Excellent, thank you. And the next, we have a couple of questions. The next one is from Avril. How much context, background facts would you give?
um my worry with giving, starting, like when I start a workshop, I generally don't talk about me or what we do or even the play. I generally just go straight in with an exercise and then explain why I've done that exercise. And imagine now if you were in a forest and you've just come from a battlefield and you've just nearly being killed, and your mate has saved you, and you save him, and you see three witches. Like, and so do the exercise first, throw them straight in, and then feed the information in gradually. I feel like if it's the other way around, they're straight into school mode, and they're, if they're not the kid who's going to engage in that, they're gonna switch off. I speak, by the way, I hated English until I was about 15, 16, when this sort of thing happened to me, and I was like, oh, so it was about Hamlet. So as the Roger Gunston Guildenstern, do you play the flute? And he goes, no. And he goes, oh, you play on me. Why don't you play the flute? Or something like that. You can tell how well I remember it. But there was an exercise where we physicalized it, and then it sort of made sense. But the being told bit wasn't good for me, but the getting up and doing it bit, and then I went on to university and studied it, and yeah, it's whatever works, isn't it?
Great, thank you, Toby. Next one from David. Any tips for performing Macbeth when you're limited in terms of space, i.e., because you're teaching a classroom full of desks and chairs? Thanks.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it, but I mean, a lot of the if there's so it depends. I mean, it depends on which bit you're trying to do. But for example, that first exercise when you're just setting up the globe, as long as you can, if you can push like three desks together towards the back of the room, and then have the center. Okay, but if you center free to keep the paupers standing in, and then everyone else sat on those outer ring, then that's fine. But if you don't want to move them at all, you can still play with height. You can get sitting on the floor, standing on the chairs if you're happy to do that, sitting on the desks. You can use the back of the room, the front of the room, sides of the room, under the desk. I'd say height's your friend here, and the final war cry between Macbeth and Macduff, you get them on opposite ends of the classroom, and somehow they have to get, you can, I know health and safety, I'm like checking myself here, but yeah, I think that's how I think. The best thing to do is just get up, and just sitting down and reading is not easy to get your body involved, so get up.
Excellent. And the next question from Sheila. Imagine this is lesson one of Macbeth with a group of year 10s. Where in the play might you start? Any favourite scenes?
Well, I think well, okay, so either the clearing in the forest where Macbeth and Banquo meet the witches for the first time. It's only a few pages in, but it's great for, if you wanted to get a bit physical, you could turn the lights off, you could put some spooky music on, and you could get them to imagine the witches up front. You could get three students up front, just tell them to be witches, and then get two warriors to walk in the room. You don't even have to do anything more than that, but it's a very easy visual scene. Alternatively, you could talk with imagine if you saw a dagger floating in front of you, and just start with a conversation like that at the end of a corridor, and you were on your way to thinking about doing something really bad, and a dagger suddenly appears in front of you. What would you think that dagger was saying? Is it saying do it or don't do it? Just starting with trying not to go straight into the text and the Shakespeare of it all, but trying to give them a decision, get them to make a choice, and maybe don't even talk about the play. If you had to do this, what would you do? Or if you were thinking this, what would you do? And then say, well, in this play, lead it in like that.
Excellent. And I think we've got time for, I don't, do we have time for the last question, Becky? It's just turned 5:30.
Go on then, let's squeak in one more.
Okay, the last final question is, I see how some of these will work with literature, but I see applications for GCSE language too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I
Well, I
suppose it's
would
more of a
say,
statement. Any thoughts, any comments on that statement?
yeah, because if it's encouraging thought about language, I would say it's I mean, yeah, it is more applicable to the literature side of things, but I'd certainly say you wouldn't switch off if you were looking at it through the language lens. So I'd hope that there would be benefits to it as well. But yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Toby. So, yeah, lots of ways in which you can use physicalizing Shakespeare to make it more memorable and interesting and get students through their GCSEs. I think, Becky, over to you.
Thank you very much, Toby, Maria, and to everyone in the room for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. The Shakespeare of it all, I think, is the phrase that I'll take away with me about this afternoon. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you at another one of our webinars soon. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.